What's the most paranormal thing that's ever happened to you? Just to clarify, this happened a long time ago, so my memory may not be completely correct. It was on a dark and early winter evening. My parents were at work and my brother was busy doing some schoolwork. The house was completely silent apart from the TV downstairs. I had some homework to do in my bag, so I went to my room and looked into my bag to find my homework. I took the sheet and my pencil case and went to shut the blinds in my room as it was dark. I took a quick look out of the window, and across the street near a lamppost I saw a man wearing dark clothes and his shadow following him. I looked outside our front door and saw what I think was a tricycle rolling down the hill we were on. I looked towards the top of the hill to see if anyone was chasing it and saw no one. I looked back, didn't see the tricycle, and saw the man's shadow moving towards us but not the man. I ran downstairs, locked the door and asked my brother if he saw anything outside. He looked at me as if I was stupid, but he said he didn't. Alright, so I know this is the internet, but you'll just have to trust me on this having actually happened to me, and please bear with this slightly lengthy recollection. My extremely Catholic mother owned a house in rural New York. We'd often go there when we went to camp or for family holidays. The place always had a weird vibe to it, as it was over 150 years old. I had several paranormal experiences, like seeing what I believed to be a spirit of a man in a brown coat and top hat in the kitchen, or hearing children's voices in the bunk bedroom when nobody was home, as well as light fixtures acting strangely. Like bulbs going out on holiday lights one by one in sequence instead of all at once. Anyways, these experiences were never emotion-inducing or threatening, just weird things I was convinced I saw. Until one day when I was about 10. I was there alone while my grandmother went shopping and was just watching Avatar: The Last Airbender and playing with Legos, pretty standard. I went to the bathroom at one point and noticed the door to the basement. I never thought anything of the basement because it was always closed and off limits, but being unsupervised and the bold kid I was, I opened the door to get a peek. It was pitch black down the stairs, but within about 3 seconds I felt an intense chill and an absolutely terrifying feeling of pure evil wash over me, like a primal fear. Every instinct in my being and soul went into full panic mode as I felt the presence rapidly approaching up the stairs. I shut that door and locked it as fast as I could and ran to the common room and grabbed a cross, convinced it was some sort of demon. Upon telling my grandmother this, her face went white, as if she wasn't as shocked as afraid, and as if she knew something about it. She called a priest into the house and had him bless the place. When he opened the door to the basement, he stopped abruptly and slowly descended. He performed his blessing down there and confided in us that he had felt the same feeling of dread, but that the house was protected by the Lord now and we had nothing to fear. I was always weary after that, but never experienced it again, and certainly never went near the basement. As I grew up, it weighed less on me, and I thought that maybe I was just a kid who spooked himself. Maybe I had a grandmother who was so religious that she thought a non-existent demon was present, and maybe the priest felt what we were telling him we had felt, and it wasn't real. Unfortunately for that theory, and the reason I share this, is because I learned a few years ago that the family that had moved into the house after my grandparents moved to Florida had abruptly moved out. They had forfeited the down payment and left immediately because, and I quote from the realtor's report, the demons in the basement were terrorizing the children to an unbearable degree. Sir, I don't know what was down there, but it wasn't human, it wasn't benevolent, and it wasn't make-believe. It's not a great story, but my family has a long history with mental illness. Therefore, whenever we get calls from family members, we assume the worst. It happened multiple times. First, my cousin was pregnant and she was super excited for the birth of her baby. It was around the 5-month mark that my mother and me started to hallucinate and see dark figures in the shape of a baby around my house. Since it happened to both my mom and I, we both got scared but did nothing about it. About a week later, my cousin had a miscarriage and we stopped seeing these apparitions. Secondly, my grandma was very sick and my mother and I started hallucinating again. This time, instead of babies crawling around corners, we saw a slumped figure. Not even a week passed and my grandma was declared dead after they told us she was recuperating. Finally, and probably why my mom and I are not scared of these apparitions, my sister has been diagnosed with depression for a long time. Since she is older, she lived in another country. My mom and I were in the kitchen and the hallway lights were off. Then we simultaneously freaked out since we saw a figure that immediately reminded us of my sister. My mom took this as a warning and called my sister immediately. Her roommate answered and my mom asked her to check on her. Turns out my sister had overdosed in sleeping pills and her roommate found her just in time to save her life. Ever since then, I believe that whatever this apparition is, it is probably someone or something that is trying to help us by warning us beforehand. One time in the dead of night, my phone was on the edge of my nightstand. I was woken up by it buzzing and when I went to grab it, it fell off the stand. I reached down with only my head and torso off bed to grab it. All I heard was the word night in my right ear. Edit. Damn, didn't expect this much feedback as I'm very new to Reddit. If you would like to hear more stories, as I have way too many, just let me know a little later and hope people read this. A lot of my friends laugh at me, but this is 100% a totally real experience. When I was 13 years old, I had a really close friend who I frequently visited every couple of weeks at her house. She literally lived in the middle of nowhere in the woods and her neighbors were stretched apart on a single gravel road. I specifically remember one end of the road opening up into a cornfield to make it even creepier. So for years me and this girl hung out. We were literally basically best friends. But then we kind of got distant. The phone calls weren't as frequent, the hangouts weren't every weekend. I kind of accepted the fact we were drifting apart. But then, when I turned 13, I got a call from her. She explained she was super busy and experienced an amazing thing that I wouldn't believe. She told me she had a demon or animal inside of her and she switched personalities. I immediately was concerned and wanted to tell her mom that she may have been suffering from a mental illness, but kind of brushed it under the rug as if it were a joke or something. So long story short, my dad tells me I need to go to her 13th birthday party because our parents were close. When I arrived, I remember her taking me and her other friends into the woods where she experienced her change and ate bark off a tree. Yay. I know. So we get back to her house and she pulls out a Ouija board. Yay. I know. At the time as a kid I was literally dying for a paranormal experience. So I touched the board with them. A demon basically said I would die at 16 by being crushed. I'm 23 now. So nothing really comes about until my dad calls and tells me he's stuck in the city and can't pick me up. So I'm basically forced to stay over her house. I was still weirded out by her behavior but was excited to hang out overnight. However, her mom forced me to sleep downstairs because I was a boy. Important to note, the basement was being redone and the floors were all concrete. So we're hanging out downstairs, having a good time laughing. Her mom tells us it's time for bed and it's around 11 p.m. Keep in mind I had been to her house dozens of times with no issues. The minute her mom went up the stairs, the entire energy of the room changed. It felt like I had 1,000 people standing around me looking at me, watching me from every angle. I didn't understand why I felt the way I did, ran down the basement hall to the bathroom and ran back to the couch I was sleeping on. I turned the fan on next to me and tried to fall asleep. I wake up and hear this noise. It's pitch black and I can't see anything. It's coming from down the hall and it's either their office or laundry room. I pinpoint the noise and realize it's the sound of blinds going up and down, up and down. Now I realize that whatever is happening is not a person and it's something messing with the blinds. I throw my sheets over my head and start flipping out. Then, the light turned on in the room. I heard a closet behind the couch open and things get thrown on the floor. Nothing was on the floor in the morning. I hear the bar stools behind the couch get dragged across the floor behind me. And the one thing I'll never forget was the sound of little feet running back and forth down the hallway from behind my couch to the end, back and forth. I heard the sound of giggling and I remember praying and begging for it to all end. I remember how bad my arms hurt because my fingers were in my ears to block out the sound. I knew if I looked from out of the covers I would have seen something that would have changed me. The best part about all of this is that every single thing I described happened a second time, in the same exact order. Probably not that paranormal, but it scared me. So I was in the house of my religious grandparents when my little brother suddenly started bleeding and he said that it felt like a nail. We were alone, so I helped him out. 20 minutes later, I needed to charge my phone, so I went to my room, just to see the hand puppet of my brother. Our uncle made one to each of us, with a nail on his nose. It was our last week in middle school. It was hot outside. My friend and I, two giggling fangirls, were hanging out by the bleachers near the softball field. Her back was to the forest behind the field, so I could see the leaves and branches swaying with the wind. Suddenly, in the middle of our conversation, time stopped. The trees behind my friend stood still. A weird black and white blur passed behind my friend. It was about her height. The moment passed quickly. It couldn't have lasted more than 2 seconds. We completely freaked out. She had seen the same blur behind me, but hers was brown and beige. Time had also stopped for her. Our recess wasn't fun after that. We were spooked and couldn't explain what we had seen. It's been 11 years. Although we're not friends anymore, I remember her dismissing what had happened, like it was nothing. I've told this story to my family, but they seemed reluctant to believe me. Heck, I had trouble believing the paranormal story my aunt had shared just before I shared mine. Whatever happened hasn't happened again. But I'm just so curious. I want to know what it was. When I was like 12 or 13, I was at a friend's house sleeping over. Her house was built in the 1800s and my town is pretty old as well. Anyways, we already knew there were ghosts in the house, but I personally at that point didn't see anything there. We were in the basement, which was her one grandma's room. It was a kinda big house and a lot of her family lived with her, and we were chilling out watching a movie when out of nowhere a rocking recliner starts violently rocking and the laundry basket on it falls over, then stops suddenly. Which is weird because there's no windows and the chair would have at least rocked a little until it came to a stop, but it just froze. Her grandma was very calm and said that stuff just happens and that honestly it was so cool. It didn't help me sleep at night though. I was working in London for 2 weeks, staying in a flat owned by a friend of a friend while he was out of town. About halfway through the job I got food poisoning and was pretty sick for 3 days. Still had to work. I got home one night at about 12 and was chilling in the front room reading a book before going to bed when I felt somebody else was in the room. I looked up and there's a Native American dude stood in the middle of the room. He is wearing some kind of vest or waistcoat and I see dark lines running up his forearms. He raises a hand, says some stuff directly to me and then just vanishes. It wasn't scary, just a bit strange. I went to bed. A few hours later I woke up and wasn't sick anymore. I drew portrait of him in my sketchbook. A few days later I was back home, Saturday on some stairs, waiting for my GF when the name Little Crow popped into my head. I wrote it next to my drawing. About 6 months later, I hadn't mentioned this experience to many people. The original friend, whose friend's flat I stayed in, gave me a book of Native American history, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and there's a chapter about a Dakota chief called Little Crow. The photo of him looks like my drawing. He always wore long sleeves because he was shot by his brother when he was young and a bullet passed through both his arms. The wounds became infected and left ugly scars that he was embarrassed about. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. New videos released daily. Leave a comment below and let us know what Reddit content you would like us to cover next.